Hi y'all, long time no talk. Well, we had a pretty sad week here. My sister's brother-in-law, he worked over at Cinemark and he was up on a ladder like 25-30 feet in the air and he fell off the ladder, fell backwards last Monday and cracked his skull open and he was like dead instantly. Pretty sad. He was a really good guy. He was 48 years old and has two great kids. One's 18, the other's 21, a really nice wife. He was just such a good man. It was like standing room only at his funeral on Friday, and not a dry eye in the house, and just everybody telling stories about, just what a good guy he was. He just, and it's just like I can think of 10 guys who could take a flying leap off of a ladder and do the world a favor by not being here anymore. And then this good guy goes, and it's sad because now you got a family that's not protected by a leader, right? And this guy's the kind of guy who wouldn't be taking the jibby jab either, And it's just, I don't know, it was just sad. He was a good guy, he worked for the Mesquite Police Department for 9 years and he left because of what the police have become, and then went over to the Cinemark and became like a general manager. And I don't know, you could just see all of his workmates showed up, and I'll tell you what, it's really crazy how obese everybody is here in America. I mean, it was unreal. And I've never been a thin person. I've always been pretty tall and muscular looking, pretty strong looking, and I was considered fat when I was a kid just because I was bigger than everyone else. And now I've stayed the same weight my whole life, at being at this height. I've stayed the same weight, still work out and everything, even though I'm hurt. And I'm one of the thinnest people in there, and I'm not even a thin person. Like I said, I tend to be more of a muscular looking person. You can just see how like insulin resistant everybody is. And when you see people do one of two things when they eat mostly plants, and all these carbs, right? You either get fat instantly or you get thin. And most people tend to get fat because the insulin triggers the release of, the sugar triggers the release of insulin, and that's what makes you store fat in the body. And humans are made to store fat just like a bear would. Like if you found some honey in nature, you'd store a bunch of fat before wintertime. And that's kind of what you're seeing here, except for there's no winter ever and no freaking fasting. It's just constant eating of, this is wheat out here that they've been harvesting. Not doing a very good job of harvesting. They didn't even cut most of it down, which is weird. I don't know. Probably because a lot of it might be kind of rotted. I noticed they ran some cattle in here the other day, let them have some of it, and then they ran them out pretty fast because they didn't want them to founder. I don't know that they call it founder in cattle. I forget what it's called, but they didn't want them to eat too much of it because it'll make them sick, right? Because not even herbivores are set up to eat that much seed at once. Seeds are made of poison, right? The animal is not supposed to just eat all the seeds and crush them up and digest them. The seed is supposed to go on and grow another plant. You can eat the plant. So if you were to be normal, right, like normal cow out here on the Johnson grass, like that's what you'd get once a year. That's the amount of seed you would get, right? A little bit of seeds here and there on these plants. But when we humans grow this wheat and corn and rice and all of this stuff in these big pastures, right? And we feed ourselves this stuff, all you do is create a lot of problems, right? You got a lot of poison going on. I'm going to put my hat back on. It was blowing off because it was windy. I think there's a storm coming here. So anyways, it's been a sad week and people are in bad shape here in Texas. It wasn't like this in the 80s. I'll tell you what, everybody was pretty darn thin back then. And you know, nobody was going to the gym either. Like, I was one of the first people. I used to hang out at the gym a lot, you know, like the old school gyms like you had in the 80s, where they were covered, everything was covered in chalk, and all you had was free weights, and the only two machines in there were like the hamstring curl and like the quadriceps, like the leg extension or whatever you want to call it. That's the only two machines in the old time gyms, you know. And everybody would be throwing, you know, Olympic lifts around. Everybody was big and strong back then, lean, if they were in the gym. And then everyone else is pretty darn thin. And I think the high fructose corn syrup has something to do with it. You know, when I was really little, Coke was in bottles, and it was made with real sugar. It was in glass bottles, right? And you drank it and you gave it back to the gas station guy, and they rebottled it, you know. They gave it back to Coca-Cola, filled it back up. But I mean, it's pretty amazing when you look around and just see what these diet recommendations are doing to people. They're putting the dye in diet, you know. It's kind of sad. And I was just thinking about it, you know, like we've been having discussions with my friends about NPCs, right? Because a lot of people think that, you know, 80% of the people in this world are NPCs and that they're born that way. And I don't actually agree with that. And I'll tell you why. Because all the evidence points to the opposite, right? Think about it. Why would the elites have to poison us from every direction, you know, from the sky, from the airwaves, from the fluoride and the chlorine in the water supply, high fructose corn syrup, you know, which has mercury in it? And how is that? Well, when you plant corn seeds, they look like the color, remember mercurochrome? It's that orange stuff. Well, they coat these seeds, especially corn, they coat them in mercury so that rats won't eat them, mice won't eat them, right? And if they do eat them, they're going to die. So when those seeds are planted, that mercury goes into the plant. So when you're having high fructose corn syrup, you're getting some mercury along with the lectins that come with the corn. So that's one of the things that's in the food supply. Then, you know, of course, they made concentration camps for cattle and pigs and chickens so that they can feed them all soy and corn and whatever else, right? They can feed them these. I read that Japanese scientists turned all these female catfish, they turned all the catfish that they had into females using soy isoflavones. That's last week, right? And then they want you eating fake meat. Yeah, of course they do, because they want your ass to be a girl. You know, and they want you girls to be weak, and they want you men to be women. You know? And then we got a bunch of people, you know, thinking that the Bill Gates diet is something good for even truther people, right? If you think that you know the truth and you believe in the truth, but you are going to follow Bill Gates' diet, you are lost. Lost, lost, lost. Okay? Look out here. What can you eat? Nothing. Because everything's made in the lab that they give you in these boxes. Everything's made in the lab. Anyways, we were talking about the concentration camps for cattle and chicken and pigs, right? I mean, the point of that is to make meat, which is what is the natural human diet, is to make that unhealthy, right? Because like if you look at the pig, the hog that they sell in the store, it ain't red meat. Well, if you go out here and you shoot one of these wild boars, you know, like the wild boars that come here, this is peanut country. They come here and they root up and they eat the peanuts, you know, and we shoot them. One of my friends, actually two of my friends run a varmint business here. That's how they make their living. It's going out at night and shooting the wild hogs and the deer. They even shoot the crows and the ravens that would eat these crops. You know, that's what a scarecrow is for. Vegans. What do you what do you think this is all for? Right? You think your diet doesn't kill animals? Are you kidding me? Okay. Anyway, so, wild boar is red meat. So what do you see in the store? Remember, it's like 20 years now they've been calling pork the other white meat. Why is that? Because they don't feed it properly. It doesn't get any heme iron. Why? Because pork, hogs can only ferment about 42% of their volatile fatty acid needs, their amino acid needs, and their B vitamins. That they can only afford. About 42% of their diet can be grass, like that. But what happens is, we kill them so soon, right? They're born, they nurse off their mother, then we fatten them up with soy and corn, and then they kill them before, you'd ever see any of the real issues. But you see it in the meat. You see that they're not healthy because they're not red meat, and only if you've ever actually been a hunter or been around wild game would you know. It's very interesting what we've done to these domestic animals. I mean, hogs, for instance, like these wild boars that we have, they were actually domestic boars that escaped. And within 2 weeks, they start growing back the bristles on their backs, and they start getting tusks, and their snouts start elongating so they can dig and get at roots. And, they eat snakes and reptiles. They eat anything they can get a hold of in the wild. And it's interesting how they will just basically become feral within a couple of weeks, because they're not living in some barn prison somewhere. I don't know, the control over the food supply is probably, I would say, the most important thing, right? Like, they really have to have control of the food supply, especially when you're talking about the jibby jab and the mark of the beast here, right? Like, they want you to not be able to live off of the grid. That was the whole point of the US government killing nearly all the bison in America, right? Like, so how did they get the Native American Indians onto the reservations? They killed off their supply of red meat, right? They put a bounty on the head. There used to be like 300 million head of bison here on the North American continent. And the U.S. government put a bounty on their heads, was paying people to kill them. And there was just piles of bones stacked everywhere. You can see the old pictures. And that's how they got rid of the Indians. That's how they got them onto the reservations. And they're doing the same thing now with the rest of us. You got to think about it. How come the Indians they didn't even have as many guns as we did. They didn't have... they just didn't have as much as we did, and yet they managed to wage war against the U.S. government for decades. And it took taking away their source of red meat to finally put the nail in their coffin. And if you notice, they have never recovered. They've never recovered. If you go and you look at the rates of drunkenness on the reservations, depression, obesity, it's really sad. But you see how the government learns, because all evil does is just do evil shit, right? And when they're successful in one evil thing, they just keep doing it over and over again. And now they're doing it to us, right? Now they're after the cows. Oh, cows are evil, and they're farting, and the farts are changing the weather. They're so full of shit. They're so full of shit, y'all. I mean, are you kidding? This continent used to be covered in bison. And bison, a bison is like 4,000 pounds. Your average cow is 1,000 pounds. Our domestic cattle, what we did is, they're the ancestor. The cattle we have now, their ancestors were the aurochs. And if you look them up, they're about 4 times the size of a cow these days. And so what our ancestors did is they found the smallest ones, right? They basically bred dwarfs to dwarfs until we got something that we could handle in the paddock, right? And even these, I don't know, cows can be, some are chill and some are not. It's just different personalities kind of thing. Some of them will run you right on out of the pasture. And that's why we tend to We bred the dwarfs of the dwarfs, and we also, if we ever found them, if we ever found ones that like were a genetic mutation and didn't have horns, we bred those, because horns are the dominant gene in a cow. I mean, if you breed a cow like the Black Angus here, they're all born without horns because they're all working on that recessive gene. But we had a beef master breed one of our cows, and bam, the calf had horns, because as soon as one of those genes, one of the dominant genes shows up for horns, then you got a horned cow. And people are starting to keep more horned cattle around here lately, last probably 10 years, because we have so many big coyotes and other animals, and we have a lot of idiot drug dealers in this area that keep like exotic cats in their house, you know, to like hide their, you know, to guard their drug stash. It's pretty crazy. But one of my dad's friends is the sheriff here, and he said, you have no idea how many exotic cats are registered in Grayson County. So yeah, we had a problem with we had 6 of our calves eaten one year because someone was letting their lioness out to hunt at night, you know, because it's expensive to feed them, so they just let them out and let them hunt and kill people's cattle. So I've noticed that people are starting to keep horned cattle again. It's kind of interesting because nobody kept horned cattle when I was a kid in the 80s. In fact, they'd have the Herefords, they're kind of a sorrel and white colored animal, cow. They tend to have horns, and I remember when I was a kid, they had one of our neighbors pulling their Herefords. Good Lord, it's kind of gruesome. There's a lot of blood coming out of them because, you know, it's at their skull or whatever. But we had the Angus cattle, so it's a little better. They don't get horns. So anyways, back to NPCs. I think NPCs are created. I don't believe that, you know, people are born like that. If they were born like that, if people were born without a soul, the evil elites would not have to do so much work. You know, they jabbing us from the minute we're born, poisoning us with the food and the water, and spraying us like roaches from the air, and indoctrinating us with propaganda from the TV and the schooling. I mean, they wouldn't have to do that much work, right? If like people are saying 80% of people are born without souls, I don't believe that at all. I believe that people are poisoned into maybe acting like NPCs, because think about it. Would the human soul seat in an unhealthy body? I mean, when you die, like look at my brother-in-law. His body became instantly unhealthy, right? With a traumatic brain injury. And what happens? He dies instantly. So, and his soul leaves the body because the body is no longer an acceptable house. And I think that's what's happening with being poisoned, right? And I don't think your soul leaves, but it's like, it's not seated as properly, right? It's like, you know, it's attached by the silver cord or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's just say for the sake of argument it is. You got this silver cord. Your soul is probably not fully seated in your body like it should be, right? You're not in proper alignment because you've been poisoned. Right? Poisoned and denied cholesterol and animal fat and meat that makes human beings healthy, right? And whenever your body becomes unhealthy, that's why all of these people who don't eat right, they're so nervous and anxious and angry, right? In fact, I was thinking about it to myself. I don't know anyone who's mentally ill that isn't a total carb addict. Like my uncle, the guy that's in the asylum for strangling my grandma and attacking my father with an axe. What did he do? He used to peel 10 pounds of potatoes, cut them up, fry them in Crisco, you know, which was cottonseed oil back then. I don't know what it is now, probably soybean oil. Fry them and then down it with a bottle of Dr. Pepper, you know, a 2-liter bottle of Dr. Pepper. Right? And they used to call schizophrenia bread madness, you know, before they came up with this great name to call it. They used to call it by what it is. Your brain can become insulin resistant. And this is what I think. This is my theory on all mental illness. What happens is your brain can run on two things, glucose or ketones. If your brain becomes insulin resistant, just like your body cells can be, if your brain cells become insulin resistant, the glucose can no longer get into the cells and the cells start dying in your brain. And then if your diet doesn't allow you to create ketones, right, because that's the other fuel for the brain starves and dies. And that is why, the original treatment for schizophrenia, Bread Madness, was to lock you in a room for a week and starve your ass until you became lucid again. And why is that? Because after about 2-3 days, 3-4 days, if you're really insulin resistant, your body is going to start burning fat and producing ketones, and you're not going to be crazy anymore. You're going to be lucid because your brain is actually being fed. Same thing, this is Alzheimer's, this is dementia. I watched my granddad. He had type 2 diabetes. All he ever did was eat dessert. Everybody knew in the 80s we used to call it sugar diabetes. Everybody knew what it caused it. Now they lie to you and tell you meat causes it. It's total bullshit. Back then, the doctors would tell you, no more carbs, no more orange juice, no more bread, nothing. No more potatoes, eat meat, drink water. And, my granddad never actually had to have insulin because that's what we did as a family. Except for Robert, who was doing his thing, making himself crazier and crazier, eating all this trash. So that's what you're seeing in society, right? That's what you're seeing with seizures. So it's when the brain is starving and you've basically made your cells so insulin resistant by your diet. And, they're never going to tell you this, probably. I don't think they're ever going to admit this. Because then, if people stop buying. When you go to CVS, like the pharmacy, and you just see the sheer amount of toxic bullshit they're trying to sell you at the pharmacy, right? Like all the snacks. You're just surrounded by poison, right? And this is a pharmacy where you're supposedly going to get well. And it just shows you that this world is just, everything's the opposite. Everything is the opposite of what they tell you. Up is down, left is right, good is evil. It's really crazy. And now, we've got our illustrious president threatening to go door to door with strike forces, to see if you will take the jibby jab or not. And, this first round will be them marking the houses who won't answer the door, marking the houses who told them to fuck off, that kind of thing. And I'd imagine there'll be second and third rounds where things get a little more dicey. So that means I gotta go buy some more ammo. It's really crazy that so many people haven't woken up yet. Although I do think a lot of people are starting to wake up. Here in Texas, people aren't really wearing the muzzles. Very few people wearing the muzzles. A lot of people with obvious insulin resistance and obese wearing the muzzles. As if blocking your airway is somehow going to save you when all you do is stuff your airway with carbohydrates and make yourself ill. I don't know. It's just sad where we've come from. And that's why I say I don't believe in NPCs. I think NPCs are made. In fact, I think this also has something to do with, how the switch skeletons above us, right? Like they do that to their children in utero, right? They give them those hormones and they change them. And I think that's what gets these souls, right? The souls of these entities to be born into the human body in the same family over and over again, right? Because what you're doing is you're making the human body inhospitable to a human soul. And that's what they're doing to us, right? They're stifling our souls. They're stifling our creativity. They're stifling everything human about us with every way they can think of, right? There's just pollution in everything. And if we naturally were born without a soul, they wouldn't have to do that because we'd already be on their side, and it would be a lot easier. It would be a lot easier to target the good people, right? If almost everyone was an NPC, you wouldn't have to poison the whole water supply. You could just go over to my house and get me and my mom, right? You could just easily single out the people who were sold and who weren't, right? There wouldn't have to be a program like this, right? You wouldn't have to have a TV in everybody's house. You wouldn't have Obama giving phones to everyone, right? They wouldn't have to do so much work if people naturally didn't have a soul. And so that's why I don't really believe in NPCs. I think NPCs are made, right? And I don't think that until you die, that your soul doesn't leave your body until you die for real. Till you die for real. And what can happen is that your soul is probably not seated as well in your body. And that's what happens. You end up with people who just aren't calm, right? Like, they're so anxious, they're so angry because their body is full of poison, and even your mind, like your thoughts are full of poison. And that's why they can never be calm, quiet, and then they push coffee on you, because coffee causes anxiety. And then they want you to drink wine at night, which, spirits, liquor's always been called spirits. Probably because it has something to do with drinking it and, lowering your vibration to where these other entities are able to affect you more. And what I notice from all of this, in my opinion, is that human beings are very strong and very powerful. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to do all of this shit to us. I mean, they gave me 6 anthrax vaccines and I'm still kicking, And if you look up what they did with anthrax, it's just horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And they got to poison you. They've got us all believing that if we poison you, you're going to be safe. Well, what does aluminum and mercury have to do with immunity? Someone who's a better chemist than I was, I got my degree and was on the dean's list. Someone who's a better chemist than me, please explain to me how injecting children with mercury and aluminum and bovine fetal cells and human fetal cells and polysorbate 80 that takes the heavy metals across the blood-brain barrier. Someone please explain to me how that makes you better as a human being and how that helps your immunity, because it doesn't. It's total bullshit. I don't know, this video might get me taken down for good, but I don't give a shit. I have a channel with the same name, LBC Ulrika, over at Brand New Tube, and I don't know. I need to make some more videos, but I've been working on myself, trying to fix some of this rheumatism I have that probably comes from all the damn vaccines that the military gave me, plus breaking my neck and jaw. But I'm doing better. I've been taking cold baths at night for 30 minutes and then cold showers in the morning. It seems to make a real difference with me being able to go out and do things. It's really controls a lot of the swelling in my body, which is great. And let's see, what else? Oh, I wanted to say, so now I know 3 people who have been affected by the jibby jab. One of them had a stroke. She's my age, pretty young. She had a stroke and went to the hospital after the jibby jab. Then this other woman that I hate, and she's my aunt. She's a gold digger that stole $1 million from me and my sister, that married my uncle when he had Alzheimer's disease. She was hospitalized with pericarditis. So Satan did a good one. Satan does do good things sometimes. I'm glad that she, too bad she did not expire. She deserves it. And then my friend's aunt, she had cancer, and in all the great wisdom of her son, who's a nurse, she got the jab and then died. My other aunt, who is really a good person, she got the jab too, and she's not looking good. She's all swollen up in the face and under her eyes, and that's not normal for her. So that's heart problems right there. So I'm fully expecting for a call one of these days about her. It's kind of sad, but I warned her. I don't know. Can't tell anybody anything because they got us so convinced that, we got to poison you with chemotherapy to save you. You think about it. Would cancer itself make you lose all your hair? Right? Would cancer itself strip your whole body down to nothing? It's very interesting if you really think about it. They pass laws that you can't use anything besides chemotherapy for cancer and radiation. You can't use anything that doesn't hurt the human, that doesn't poison the shit out of the human to save them. Whether it's these petrochemical medications, the jabs they give you from literally the instant you're born, synthetic vitamin K, ADEK, all that's going to come from your mother's milk because it's all animal hormones. Synthetic versions are not the same thing. Synthetic versions, like the synthetic iron, whatever, it'll show up in a blood test, but that doesn't mean that the cells are utilizing it. That's the other thing, right? This is a big scam, right? Oh, we're going to give you vitamin B12 because you're starving yourself, right? Because you can't ferment it from plants. You're starving yourself. We're going to give you synthetic B12. Then we're going to test your blood levels. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it's getting into the cells and being used by the cells. Everything in this world is designed as a scam. A big old scam. And I don't know how we get people to see around it. I mean, except for the fact that the evil that rules us, they're really out in the open. They can't get any more blatantly obvious that they hate us, right? That they're going to come to your door with the poison. If anyone else is holding out, thinking that there's some good in the government somewhere, yeah, good luck. It's good that it's blatantly obvious. And, I don't even know. I wonder to myself, why I'm still here. Why all of us, like I said, this good brother-in-law died, and I don't know. I wonder if it's on purpose to, leave the family without their leader, to leave them vulnerable. It's just very strange. I'm glad he's not suffering anymore, though. I'm glad he's not here to suffer with us. But I feel bad that the family lost such a good person. It's devastating. It's very hard to find someone who's honest and straightforward and good, just a good person. And, he wasn't even the guy that ate the best, he was known for drinking big gulps. And he was this huge guy. He's really tall and kind of chunky. But, when you're really big like that, when you're really tall, you carry it better than other people. Plus, he had been an athlete. So, but he never managed to, get his soul unseated, you know what I mean? By too much poison. And I guess maybe that's just part of being a strong soul, like a strong, determined person. And everyone should try to be like that. His example, he was such a good person. It's really not how long you live, it's how you live. And, you, as one person, you can affect so many other people just by doing the right thing. And, we're never shown this example by the elites. They want us to think, that being bad is the way to go. Every freaking pop star with their gone bad persona. It's just so old and overdone. Being a good person is where it's at. Being a good soul and fighting a good fight against this evil, that's what matters. not your selfishness or anything like that. And try to stay out of the matrix in terms of acting. Whenever they tell you to do something, know that it's always the exact opposite and use your discernment. When they tell you, oh, do this to be healthy, well, ask yourself, does it make any sense? Do I see other people doing this and actually being healthy? Or with like chemo. I mean, how many people survive it? I know one person who survived chemotherapy. And you've just never seen anyone's skin who is just like, it like routed out all of the cholesterol, all the animal fat in her skin. And she's so wrinkled. I've never seen anybody so wrinkled. And she's only in her 60s, and I think she had the cancer in her 50s. But everybody else I know died from the chemo. Like my friend Kaki, he went into this vaccine trial at the NIH for cancer, and they gave him this virulent bone cancer. And then they started irradiating him and gave him chemotherapy. And I remember the first day that I saw him when he had the radiation and the chemo, his eyes were lit up like he was radioactive. Never seen anything like it in my life. Never seen anything like it since. And then at Johns Hopkins, they were feeding him cookies the size of a wagon wheel, and mashed potatoes and gravy and sugar jello, and I mean, just on and on. Bagels and coffee and everything. I actually went off. I went off on the doctors, the oncologist. Are you trying to kill him? This was 2010. Are you trying to kill him? That glucose feeds tumors. I mean, we've known that since 1920. Otto von Warburg won the Nobel Prize for the Warburg effect, right? And they pretend that just never happened. And of course, they were looking at me like I was nuts, but I was right, because he did die. He died like a couple of months later. Oh my God, just crazy. And then my other friend, Susan, who died way too young, she didn't even make it to 40. She was 38, diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And for a whole year, the doctors fiddle-fucked around with her, telling her she had an ulcer when she had pancreatic cancer. And so once they finally figured out, they did a scan on her, because they kept telling her, oh, you just have an ulcer, take this Prilosec, which they're having a big-ass lawsuit about right now for giving people cancer, right, for the last 30 years, FDA approved, giving people cancer. So they found out, and they were like, oh, we've been dealing with you for a year, but now you have 3 months to live. So then they started giving her massive doses of radiation and chemo, and she lost all her hair, and she was this beautiful girl too. She was half white and half Chinese. She looked like a Hawaiian princess. In fact, I remember the first day I saw her at school, in college, I said, are you a Hawaiian princess? And she was like, well, not actually, but I am from Hawaii. And I was like, oh, wow. She's like, my dad is white and my mom is Chinese. And she was just beautiful, this long black hair, and just so gorgeous. And everybody loved her. Right? It's like the same situation with my brother-in-law, Brandon. I mean, he was just a great person, and so was she. Everybody loved her. She was so fun. And then to watch her die like this, to be poisoned. And I think the only way to actually treat cancer when you get it is to start fasting and to only refeed with like meat, raw eggs, and it has to be meat that's grass-fed, right? Has to be raw eggs from chickens that aren't being fed soy. And I think if you fast enough and you only refeed with things that do not give any insulin, don't let the insulin get in the body. Keep the insulin as low as possible so that the tumors starve. And then when you're fasting, the body will go into autophagy and eat up cells that are affecting the body and that aren't that good. And another thing that I was reading about cancer, like back when my friend Kaki was dying of it, is there's like a starch coating on cancer. And that's why the body somehow doesn't know to attack it. because of this starch coating. Well, if you don't eat any starch, you're not going to have any coating to protect this tumor, which I thought was an interesting bunch of papers I read. So I think probably the best way to treat it is through fasting and then just refeeding with the natural human diet, which is, meat as raw as you can stand it, raw eggs, if you can get raw milk, but I'd probably stay away from that because it has some carbs in it. Not a lot, but it also has some like growth factors in there. You might want to stay away from it. You could probably have cream just because the carbs aren't in it. And I've always, when I was a little kid, I always wanted to have like an asylum. I always thought if I could treat my uncle and I could keep him away, because I was like 6 or 7 years old when I started noticing how he ate, right? And how he ate to change the way he would act, right? He would eat, I'm not joking, 10 pounds of potatoes, cut up, fry them, eat them, drink it down with Dr. Pepper. And he also made mashed potatoes all the time, bread, with margarine, because back in the 80s, my mom always knew butter was good, and my grandma would always say, my grandma from Ohio, the Slavic grandma, if it's not butter, it's trash, don't eat it. It's poison. And she was right, because I watched my uncle do this, and I watched how he ate, and I remember thinking to myself, note to self, don't eat like that. Because you could see him, like his demeanor change and just go off, and he'd go off for days after eating like this. I mean, this guy, back in the 80s, you could still buy dynamite, like down at the feed store, because, people used to actually do stuff with dynamite. We, make a pond with it, or, you clear things out. My uncle was like collecting dynamite in the barn because, he believed that my grandma was poisoning him. And the paranoid schizophrenics are very dangerous because, paranoia, they believe someone is trying to poison them, someone is trying to kill them, and if, God forbid, they think it's you, right? Anyways, so this is just my talk for a Sunday. Hi, little girl. This little dog is so cute. She likes to bark at me. What are you doing, sweetie? She was left out here, and these people adopted her. She was just dropped off out here. At least she wasn't shot in the head like these other two dogs. Hi, sweetie. What are you doing? You jumping? Come on, jump up. Jump. Jump. Good girl. She's so cute. She won't let me pet her, though. She's scared of me. But she's pretty sweet. Hi, guys. Good dogs. I love this person, my neighbor here. They have this gate that says, it has like crossed guns. We don't call 911. This is why Americans are somewhat safe, right? See this? See the guns? It says we don't call 911. This is why they've been trying to get us to get rid of the guns for years, over and over and over again. Oh, this many people were shot in Chicago, where there just happens to be a ban on good people having guns, right? Because the government makes sure the bad people have guns. I don't know if y'all know, but like back in the 80s, certain rappers were saying that in the ghettos, there were pallets of guns just being dropped off and left, right? For the black people to shoot themselves, shoot each other, right? I mean, that's one of the ways all these guns got there in the first place. Same thing with the cartels. Declare drugs illegal, then they run the drugs and they arm the cartels. So they always win. They always fund both sides of every war. That's why this is a spiritual thing, right? Like, that's how you win here, is spiritually, each individual making the choice to not be part of the evil. And if enough of us did this, none of this evil could perpetuate, right? None of it. It could do nothing without us helping them. And in every war, there are always collaborators, We got the muzzle wearers and the jab takers. They're the Vichy French of modern times. They're the Nazi doctors and nurses of the modern times, right? Everybody going along with this. They're the communists, right? Ratting out their neighbors during the Soviet Union, you know, when Stalin was there. And the Bolshevik Revolution, ratting out your neighbors. Same thing, different century, repeating over and over again in the fear porn loop here. And the way out of it is to not follow orders. Oh, look at this pretty cardinal. I don't know if y'all could see that. Pretty male cardinal. Red. Alright, well, I'm going to let y'all go. And I hope you have a good weekend. Hope you enjoy your day off if you have it. Take care. Bye.